My name is Bassett. I will be your narrator, the one that tells you into the darkness. Here, I reveal tales that may keep you restless at night. Tales you can even share with me at my email mentioned in the description. So switch off the lamps, put on your earphones, and let's commence our tale. This tale is shared from our audience, they whisper. Some folks like to laugh and call the shadow net a joke. It isn't. Not by a long shot. It's not somewhere even a cocky amateur should wander into. Hell, I'd warn even the most experienced coder with a shred of conscience to stay the adrenaline away. That place will mark you, will make you terrified to trace someone else's digital footprints ever again. I know this because I used to be one of them. I grew up on computers, started at 12, obsessed with being a kind of cyber explorer, hunting the uncharted corridors of the network. By the time I was 20, I knew which processes to kill, which to leave alive, how to coax an old machine into behaving like a racing rig. Dial-up was a nuisance other people complained about. To me, it was just a bottleneck you learned to work around. By sophomore year at the institute, I could call myself an ace. I kept up with the best and had a small reputation on the forums. We worked tricks on Atlas, the search engine everyone used for everything. A few of us had cracked methods to push the search deeper into private directories. Call it our personal hack. A way to peer past the polite surface of the web. Back then, Streambox had just been swallowed whole by a giant corporation, and content creators were getting slapped with bogus copyright strikes left and right. I lost channels to that nonsense more than once, but that's beside the point. I'm just sketching the backdrop for the younger netizens reading this. Anyone who knew their way around called the shadow net by its true purpose a gateway to the global black market. Weapons, contraband, forbidden services, you name it, it was somewhere down there. I bought imported gear a handful of times and kept a modest stash for myself during that stretch of college life when getting high was practically a curriculum. Most friends came to me for the hookup. Frequent buyers get better rates. That's how the market worked. You couldn't just fire up some browser extension and stroll in. No, not in those days. You needed ghosted connections, chained proxies, parent directory exploits, backdoors, scramblers, dump sites. A toolkit of techniques we used when browsers weren't yet bloated with Java and trackers. Some called it the darknet back then. Later the name morphed into something else. I don't care what it's tagged now. I'm never going back. I had just unboxed a new piece of hardware for my rig. An old school tube monitor refurbished into something meaner than it looked, and was about to plug into the same old hunger that had pulled me deeper than I'd ever intended. I'd finally quit the drift, and after ordering a refurbished monitor and another stick of RAM, my rig was ready. Plan was simple: hustle a trade for a better sound card with a vendor I knew on the BazaarNet, boot up a few old games, and poke around for bargains. Then a ping lit up. Ari had sent me a Dumpka trail of sealed black nodes that peeled open into deeper directories. It looked like tunneling, only vaster. Knowing my appetite, she'd forwarded it. She knew I'd follow. I was the kind of vagrant hacker in our crew who wandered without a map, opening doors just to see what was behind them. Sometimes you hit treasure, sometimes a hard wall. Aria didn't skimp on the no-test start point, forks she'd taken, how often she rotated her address every 30 to 45 seconds, the cloaking stacks she'd chained, the encryption levels at each node, and how long each hop had taken. 7 boxes, she said. She'd stalled at the 7th. Challenge accepted. I skimmed her log, spun up the ghost hooks and IP scramblers, and loaded the new cipher I'd been tuning. It let me borrow an exit address for 30 seconds, then leap. Long enough to look like a ghost. In practice, that meant everything had to be slow and deliberate on my cramped Inspiron. But it worked. 10 minutes later I was in. Following Aria's forks, I crawled parent directory to parent directory. The first black box I found was trivial, old school SOAR and padding that fell in minutes. Inside was a direct directory with 4 subfolders. Aria had gone down link 2, but curiosity pulled me to the first. 3 minutes and it was a dead end, so I backtracked and snapped onto her laid path. Half an hour and 6 boxes later I hit the 7th. This lock wore a different face. Every hacker, even the greats, leaves a breath of metadata. Just enough to follow if you know the cadence. Aria had been here. She'd left the faint rhythm that told me where she paused. This was a bespoke seal, the kind that chewed up casual time and spit out frustration. It was a Thursday night. I'd wrapped early and wasn't on shift, so time was mine. And this box was a tricky little Lirotasin. I had never slogged through so many stubborn codes in my life. It wasn't even difficult, just irritating. A tug here, a twist there, slipping between algorithms, dipping through loops, juggling fragments of cipher. Each time I tried to pause and make sense of what I was wading through, the lock would boot me out, forcing me back to square one. 45 minutes later, I cracked it. For a moment, I felt untouchable. But inside wasn't treasure, just another directory, this one with only a single item, a hyperlink labeled what MH. Too thrilled at my small victory, I didn't bother to think about what those letters meant. Like an idiot, I just clicked. My ghost shield was active, bouncing me around, so I wasn't worried about being traced. The redirect churned slower than usual, which told me I'd slipped through a back door. Never a smart move unless you owned the place or thought you were bulletproof. 5 minutes crawled by before the page revealed itself. As it loaded, faint carnival music bled through my headphones, so soft it could have been mistaken for a whisper. Across the screen, bold letters declared, "Welcome to the Marrow Hall." My curiosity flared instantly. I'd read a cult novel once with the same title, strange, haunting collection of tales, and assumed I was about to stumble into a fan-made shrine. I would have preferred that more than anything. Then a chat window popped open at the bottom corner of the browser, gray, pulsing alive. My chest tightened the instant I read the words inside: "A welcome to the Marrow Hall, home of every chill and thrill you can imagine, and some beyond your darkest dreams. Would you like a guided tour?" The smart move was to run. Anyone behind that message was watching the flows in real time, but my fingers hesitated. "No thank you," I typed back. The reply came instantly: "If you insist. Do you already know your way around Marrow Hall, then? I don't think I've seen you here before." "No," I answered. I was referred by a friend. I couldn't believe I'd lied like that, but I panicked. Something in the way the replies came back told me this wasn't some dumb bot. It was a real person, and out here in the shadow net you squirm even 1 inch and they'll chew you up. Their next message came quick. "Oh, you mean for tonight's showcase? We issued guest tokens to all VIPs so they could bring companions. You must be a guest with a voucher. An event. The Veriston, there was an event. Play it cool," I told myself. I'd clearly crashed to members, only knowed by sneaking in the back way. "Sorry, I don't know my way around. I don't see any guide links." "You wouldn't," they replied. "The Marrow Hall is invite only. Entry requires a voucher or a direct invitation. That's why your IP wasn't recognized." My stomach dropped. If they could see my IP, they could watch it flicker as my ghost code latched on and hopped addresses. In a panic, I yanked up the command prompt and tore the ghost down. Stopped the scrambler and froze my address. The screen spat back a static listing, my connection mapped to Estonia. "I see," the host typed. "The showcase starts soon. Click the link when you're ready. Chatting is free, but guests stream in SD. HD is reserved for members. Etiquette: one warning, then ban. You may leave before the end, but your IP will be blacklisted unless you obtain a personal invite. Your IP has been logged for future reference. We are not liable for any physical, emotional, or psychological trauma incurred during the event. Do you accept these rules?" I was so detunked. "Yes, I accepted." "Excellent. Click the link to enter. Enjoy the show." The chat window vanished. The thin, warped carnival loop snaked on in the background. A ticker scrolled along the top. Signs na minutes. I knew I was still being watched, so I hesitated, then clicked. The redirect landed me on another page, a drawn stage framed by velvet curtains, red and heavy. The browser filled with theater ambience, quiet murmur of an audience, the rustle of paper programs, a soft cuff from some unseen throat. My screen felt suddenly very small under the hush, like a single seat in a huge empty house. I was impressed. They'd gone all out for whatever this was. At about 10 minutes till showtime, a bigger window slid open and a swarm of screen names started popping into it as people arrived. It was a group chat. The kind that lets everyone rant through the performance. Greetings flew around like old friends stumbling into a bar. Beers already being cracked in emojis. I hadn't bothered to pick a handle, so I stayed the default anonymous 10235, or whatever dumb number the site spat out. A soft ping sounded, the curtains on the drawn stage animatedly peeled back, and a blank video frame filled the center. Probably a live feed, though the camera read "Oh Heffelini" in the corner. The chat hummed with speculation. Apparently it was taboo to discuss past showcases. Nobody dared drop spoilers. My nerves were already stretched raw and nothing had even started. That should have been my cue to bail. But I hadn't typed a word yet and someone noticed. "Hey, thinking on when AFK." A name called. My stupid fingers betrayed me and I typed, "Don't know yo, anon." A hail of messages drowned the screen. People counted down. The overlay above the video ticked down from 30 seconds. The numbers shifting from white to a bruised pink, then a full dark red as the seconds bled away. At 0 the digits dissolved into static and the frame snapped alive. A figure filled the screen. The mask was a jarring porcelain white with painted cobalt eyes and a black grin. Wild, wiry hair bristled around the edges, a vintage top hat shadowed the brow. He wore an immaculate suit, crimson and onyx, one half of a cape slung over a shoulder. In one gloved hand he toyed with a cane capped by a silver skull. "Good evening," the voice rolled out, unnervingly smooth. "Welcome back, friends. And to the newcomers, welcome to the Night Menagerie. I am your host, Mr. Caro, proprietor of this little nocturne." I laughed despite myself. A short, disbelieving noise, some of my tightness loosening. What the Aratin was this? A carnival ringmaster streaming to a criminal forum. The Johnny music undercut the scene and I leaned back, trying to make sense of the ridiculous show. Silently, I cursed myself for getting so worked up over what I thought had been nothing. "We have a very special treat in store tonight," the masked host announced. "Are you ready for the show to begin?" The chat box erupted, lines of yes and emojis flashing by faster than I could read. Mr. Caro chuckled, twirling his cane between his gloved palms before leaning close to the camera, tilting his head like a curious bird. "Very well," he said smoothly. "Let the curtain rise." He stepped aside, flourishing his cane toward the darkness behind him. An overhead light snapped on, illuminating a man strapped flat to a steel table. An animal mask. This one a stag, antlers jutting awkwardly from its crown, covered his face. He thrashed against the leather restraints binding his limbs. Then a buzzsaw whined to life near his ankles. For a heartbeat I thought the applause that filled the speakers was a canned track. It had to be. But the chat lit up in a frenzy of excitement, the screen filled with congratulations and louder as my stomach dropped to ice. "Starting us off, we have our dear stag," Caro announced brightly. "As you all know, last week you voted, and the winning executioner for tonight is..." He paused as if for dramatic flair. "Nixmare 571. Their entry, Death by Saw, secured them the crown. And so here it is." The name glowed in the chat window, spewing gleeful messages while others showered congratulations. Everyone except me. My hands flew to my mouth, stifling a sound I wasn't sure was a gasp or a gag. Did no one else care about the muffled screams of the man bound to that table? What the Everington was wrong with these people? Nixmare typed again, directing slowly. "Inch him toward it." Two masked assistants moved in, undoing the restraints just enough to drag the stag forward. He kicked, clawed, fought with desperate energy, but they were built like stone. Each seized his arms and legs, spreading him out above the spinning blade. His muffled cries cracked into shrieks as the saw bit into him. The sound, God. The sound was the same as a butcher tearing through a side of meat, flesh shredding, bone splintering. Wet, sharp, endless. I turned away, pressing harder against my mouth, eyes squeezed shut, but closing them didn't help. The scream stayed. The smell of phantom blood seemed to seep from my own imagination. And above it all, the audience cheered. The spray of blood mixed with those horrible screams carved itself under my skin. I tuned the chat out. They were getting off on this, every last one of them. And it made bile crawl up my throat. In all my time drifting the shadow net, I'd heard whispers of things like this, sordid showcases where members paid uply to watch real people disintegrate. The public wanted more. They paid for it. They tossed victims away like trash. It was murder, plain and simple. When the final keening cut off, the pre-recorded applause swelled and the carnival loop wound back in. I opened my eyes and realized I'd been crying. 20 years old and something like this had put me on my knees. I'd grown up thinking people deserved second chancers. Not these monsters. They should be left in a radioactive crater and never seen again. But I couldn't do shit about it. Calling the cops would have been idiotic. One of them could pull up my frozen IP, see I'd been piggybacking, and unravel me to my real address. They'd come for me. I tried to close the browser. It wouldn't quit. Task manager, nothing. Some script from the site was locking everything down. A trap. We were locked in, everyone was. The next act. The host purred. "Will be dear Viola." They hauled in a young woman with a tiger mask, orange stripes painted crooked across porcelain, and sat her in a clawfoot tub. The tub filled with water, and on a nearby table someone placed a battery and a coil of jumper cables. My chest clenched. No, no, no. I stopped caring about subtlety. I opened a command prompt and started murdering processes one by one, looking for a hole big enough to wedge myself into. Just enough to pry the browser free, slip out, and let the site seal itself behind me. A handful of dead scripts wouldn't raise alarms. I told myself that. I was the only frantic user trying to escape. The instant I terminated one background thread, another chat pop-up bloomed on my screen. My throat went dry, my hands froze above the keys. "I've been waiting for you to make your move," the gray box read. I told myself it was coincidence. It had to be. The code I'd killed had been innocuous. Housekeeping cron jobs, nothing tied to the page lock. But that message felt deliberate, intimate, like a finger tapping the glass between us. I played it off. "What are you talking about? You think I don't know a ghost hacker when I see one?" My hands shook. I'd been stupid. Careless. My pulse hammered as the message soaked through. They weren't in Estonia at all, and whatever trick they'd woven around my trail had been almost perfect. I'd let my curiosity slit the one thing keeping me alive in that room. Panic drowned everything else. If they peeled back that misdirection, I'd be exposed. My real address, my life. I didn't wait to argue the odds. I yanked the power cord from the back of the case. The screen went black and the carnival loop died mid-bar. I didn't stop there. I dragged the tower to the sink, ripped panels off, and started tearing hardware free like a man possessed. RAM, drives, the sound card. Everything went into the basin. I drowned the components in cold water and grabbed a handful of refrigerator magnets, scrubbing every circuit until my fingers cramped and the metal tasted like copper fear. My roommate walked in while I was half stripped under the desk. She gaped. "What the hell are you doing?" "Not your business." I snap it, and I meant it. I shoved the chassis back together in a ragged, useless form and pushed the wreck into a closet. For 6 months after that I didn't touch a personal machine. Campus labs and school terminals were my only refuge. I purged accounts. Old emails, throwaway handles, even relics from middle school. I sorted my profiles away until I was practically a ghost in the indexes. I told no one I was going dark. Maybe it was kinder that way. I never told Area that I'd made it past the last black node. 8 years later, I still haven't said a word. I don't know whether the Marrow Hall still streams its sick theatrics, or whether the puppeteer finally burned the stage and walked away. Frankly, I don't want to know. The one thing I took with me from that night was a promise. Never again would I click on a greeting that read, "Welcome to the Marrow Hall."